A nanny was humiliated, despised by her employer, and unfairly dismissed because she was black. Years later, she encounters him again, and he can't believe it. A young black nanny cared for little Ethan as if he were her younger brother, offering him love and protection in every gesture. But one day, everything changed. She was humiliated, despised, and cruelly dismissed by those she trusted. Tiana saw her world crumble. Years later, fate brings her face to face with her past in an unexpected reunion. Will justice finally prevail? Tiana always loved the sun, the golden light that filtered through the leaves of the trees, illuminating the park, made her heart vibrate with a mix of happiness and hope. It was one of the most beautiful days of summer, and Ethan's laughter, the little 5-year-old under her care, echoed like a sweet melody, filling the air with contagious joy. With her curly hair tied up in a messy bun and her skin glowing under the warmth, Tiana felt at peace, as if the world was in perfect harmony. "Look, Tiana, I'm a superhero," Ethan exclaimed, using an improvised cape made from a towel he found in the park. He ran in circles, waving his little arms as he tried to imitate the moves of his favorite hero. "That's right, Ethan. Fly high. Save the day." Tiana encouraged him, her voice full of enthusiasm. She bent down a little, ready to join the game. She had never felt more alive than in those moments when she cared for the child. It was a relationship that went beyond work. It was a connection that made her believe she was contributing somehow to his future. The day passed in laughter and games. Tiana told stories of princesses and dragons, while Ethan watched her with bright eyes, completely captivated. To her, this was the true meaning of happiness, being a source of joy and learning for a growing child. Time seemed to fly, and when the sun began to set, painting the sky pink and orange, Tiana decided it was time to head home. As they walked back, the light-hearted atmosphere began to fade slowly. Tiana noticed that the neighborhood was more agitated than usual. Ethan's laughter echoed in her mind, but as they approached the Smith's house, a cloud of unease began to hover over her. Turning the corner, the sound of raised voices made her hesitate. She stopped for a moment, caught between curiosity and the fear of getting involved in something undesirable. "What are you doing here? You have nothing to do with this." David Smith's voice, Ethan's father, cut through the air with an angry tone. Tiana felt a chill in her stomach, recognizing the aggressive tone. She cautiously approached, peeking through one of the house's windows. Inside, David stood, gesticulating furiously, while Laura, his wife, tried to calm him. "David, this is not how things are solved. You're overreacting." Laura's voice was soft, but Tiana could feel the tension in the air. "Overreacting? You don't understand. That black girl only brings trouble. That black girl. I don't trust her." He referred to Tiana as that black girl, as if she had no name, no story, no dignity. Tiana felt a wave of indignation. She had always strived to take good care of Ethan, to be a positive influence in the child's life. She cared for him like she did her younger brother, with all the love she had. Hearing this hurt her deeply. "She's taking care of our son. You can't just talk about her like that." Laura's defense was more an attempt to appease the situation than genuine support. Tiana held her breath, her heart racing. She wanted to go in and confront David, but she knew that would only make things worse. "Don't you see? He's always in trouble. It has to be her fault. She has no idea. She doesn't realize it. You don't get it. People like her are irresponsible. She could ruin our son." David continued, his tone intensifying. Tiana felt her hands clench involuntarily. He was accusing her without any proof, without any reason. It was as if the words spilled from his mouth like venom, infecting everything around. "I won't let you take her away from Ethan, David." Laura finally raised her voice. A part of Tiana wished Laura had more courage, that she would stand up and defend her dignity. But another part of her was paralyzed by the fear that the situation could become even more hostile. Tiana stepped away from the window, her stomach in knots. Every step she took towards her home felt heavier than the last. The reality of the hostility surrounding her hit her hard. She had always known the world wasn't easy, but hearing David's words made her realize just how cruel things could be. He didn't see her as a young dreamer, full of hopes and ambitions. To him, she was just a nanny, an intruder in his life. When she entered her house, Tiana tried to distract herself, but her mind was in a whirlwind. She thought of Ethan, how special he was, how he reminded her of her younger brother, and how much she worried about his future. But the image of David insulting her haunted her, like a shadow that wouldn't leave her alone. What could she do to change that reality? How could she show David that she was more than what he thought, that she deserved respect? That night, as she prepared for bed, Tiana decided she wouldn't let David's hatred define her. She looked in the mirror and saw a young woman full of dreams, hopes, and determination. "Your life is more than this," she whispered to herself. "You're stronger than this." She remembered her family, how her parents had always taught her to fight for her rights, not to be brought down by others' cruel words. This experience with David couldn't be the end of her story, but a chapter yet to be written. Tiana closed her eyes and dreamed of a different future, one where she could be respected, where love and empathy would overcome prejudice and ignorance. As the moonlight streamed through the window, she made a promise to herself. No matter what happened, she would fight for her truth. Life was hard, but hope was a flame that should never be extinguished. And so, with her heart beating strongly, Tiana drifted off to sleep, determined to face whatever came next. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the Smiths' living room, casting a soft glow on the dark wooden furniture. Tiana was tidying up some scattered toys on the floor, while Ethan, the little 5-year-old boy, played happily in the corner, his laughter like light music in the air. Every time the boy laughed, Tiana's heart warmed. Taking care of him was always a pleasure, and she dedicated herself to the task with love. However, even amidst the smiles and the innocence of childhood, Tiana couldn't ignore the tension that lingered in the air, especially when David, Ethan's father, was nearby. She knew he didn't respect her as she deserved. The words he whispered, though quiet, seemed to echo in her mind, like a shadow that refused to disappear. That morning, Laura, Ethan's mother, was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The smell of pancakes and fresh coffee filled the air, but Tiana felt something was wrong. David's conversations with his friends, which used to be cheerful, had turned into a parade of tasteless jokes and disparaging comments about women and people of color. "Look who's taking care of our little genius today. The black girl he's hanging out with," David had once joked, his voice dripping with irony. "I think it's better to keep him safe, away from any influence. But my wife won't let me kick her out of the house. I have to put up with that black girl." The laughter of his friends was unmistakable, filled with whispered comments she didn't understand and glances in her direction. Tiana, just a few steps away, felt her heart sink. That particular day, while the children were playing in the living room, David had invited some of his friends over to watch a football match on TV. The conversation soon veered toward Tiana, and David didn't miss the chance to make another joke. "I think we should train Tiana to take care of my friends' kids too. Not just me putting up with her. You guys should suffer as well." The men's laughter echoed in the house, and Tiana quickly turned away, trying to hide the pain she felt inside. Laura, who was coming in from the kitchen, heard the comments and shot a disapproving look at David. "David, stop. That's not funny. Tiana does an excellent job with Ethan," she said, trying to steer the conversation away. But her words seemed like a distant echo, drowned out by David's and his friends' laughter. Tiana decided it was best to ignore it. She loved Ethan too much, so she focused on him, playing with him and making him laugh. "Let's play hide and seek, Ethan," she suggested, quickly changing the atmosphere. The boy, always excited, eagerly agreed, and soon they were running around the house, laughing and shouting. However, the game was interrupted by a series of screams coming from the backyard. Tiana looked out the window and saw a group of children, including some from the neighborhood, who had come to play with Ethan. Confusion was about to erupt. The children were around a tray full of homemade yogurt that Mrs. Laura had made, and suddenly it spilled due to one of the children's accidents, spilling its contents all over the ground. There were laughs and shouts, and some of the children started a yogurt war, throwing it at each other and making a mess everywhere. "No, Look what you've done. One of the girls screamed, crying, while the others laughed and smeared themselves even more with yogurt. Tiana rushed outside, knowing that David wouldn't be happy with the situation. Many children were laughing, others were crying, and a great confusion set in. Several kids were smearing yogurt on each other, in their hair, on their hands, on their faces, laughing nervously while others wept hysterically over the mess. Tiana approached, trying to stop the game, to pull them away, trying to help. Calm down, kids. Let's stop this. This isn't a good joke. It's a waste of food. Stop. Help clean up. Let's get some towels. Don't do this, she said, attempting to change the mood. But at that moment, David appeared, eyes wide, his face red with anger. What's going on here? He shouted, making the children freeze abruptly. Tiana stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans. It was an accident, Mr. David. The children were playing, and the yogurt tray fell, she explained calmly, despite her racing heart. David looked at her, his eyes burning with contempt. I don't want to hear your excuses, he shouted harshly. What a filthy mess. You're responsible for watching them, and now look at this. They're all covered in yogurt because of you. What a disgrace. There are kids crying. If this is normal at your home, it's not here. The accusation, like an arrow, struck Tiana deeply. She felt the heat rise to her face, but she maintained her composure. David, calm down. It was an accident. The kids didn't do it on purpose. Laura intervened, trying to calm the situation. But David wasn't willing to listen. You can't control a group of kids. Look at this disaster. Look how dirty they are. There are children crying. What are we going to tell their parents? You're incompetent. You don't know how to take care of children. Look at the state of everything. Look at the waste. Expensive food thrown away. How can you be responsible for my son? He replied, looking at Tiana with a gaze that made her feel small. The children, now silent, looked nervously at one another. Tiana took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. I can help clean, Mr. David. There's no need to get like this. They're just kids. I brought the yogurt tray out to refresh them and give them something to eat. Unfortunately, an accident happened. They were playing. I'll help them clean up, she said, looking him in the eye. But Ethan's father didn't hold back. No, Tiana, enough. You're completely incompetent. Who told you to bring that yogurt tray? Who authorized you? This is expensive food, and you were only supposed to watch the kids. Look at what you've done. I can't trust you. I don't trust you. You're useless. Every time you're around, something bad happens. People like you can't be trusted, and who knows what else you might be doing. Whoever steals food is capable of doing worse things. His words cut like knives, and Tiana's indignation grew. I didn't steal anything. I'm not a criminal, Mr. David, she responded, her voice firm. I only took the yogurt from the fridge, thinking it would be a good idea to refresh the kids with it. I didn't know it was expensive. I've taken care of Ethan for years. I care for him just as I did for my brother. I've never done anything to deserve this treatment. David laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a laugh of disdain. That explains it. This isn't your house. We're not people like you from your kind, in case you didn't notice. Enough. Get out of here. Find a new job because I don't want you in my house anymore. I don't trust you, and I want you far away from my son. You're not a good influence, and you're ruining him and causing us losses, he said, with his decision resonating like a final verdict. Tiana felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. The children, who had been joyful before, now looked at her in fear, their eyes wide. And he continued, Get out of my house now, he shouted, and the echo of his voice reverberated off the walls, making Tiana feel utterly helpless. Get out now. Laura looked at Tiana, with a mixture of shame and sadness in her gaze. Tiana, I'm sorry, she murmured, but David didn't allow her to say more. With a heavy heart, tears in her eyes, Tiana turned to the children, who were watching her with wide, frightened eyes. It's okay, kids. I'll be fine, she said, though she knew it wasn't true. With heavy steps, she hurried toward the door, feeling the weight of injustice crushing her spirit. She just wanted to leave. Her face burned with a mix of anger, indignation, and pain. When she finally left the house, a wave of tears overwhelmed her. She didn't understand how someone who had given so much love and dedication could be treated like that. Tiana's life, which had once seemed full of promise and dreams, now felt full of uncertainties. She needed the money. She liked Ethan and believed she had cared for him well. Tiana was nervous. Her heart pounded in her chest, and anxiety flowed like a turbulent river through her veins. She needed to return to Ethan's house to collect her things. It was a hot summer afternoon, and the sun seemed to shine more intensely, as if watching everything from above. That morning, Mrs. Laura Smith was waiting for her. With one last glance at little Ethan, who was distracted with his toys, she headed to the living room. The room was perfectly tidy, as always. Dark leather sofas, a coffee table full of decoration magazines, and a large painting on the wall that depicted a tranquil landscape. But at that moment, everything felt suffocating to Tiana. Laura was sitting in an armchair, her face tense and worried. "Tiana," Laura began, in a soft voice, "we need to talk about what happened over the weekend." Tiana swallowed hard. She remembered the confusion in the park when the children had too much fun with the spilled yogurt. The memory of those innocent laughs contrasted with the tension in the air. "I'm really sorry, Mrs. Laura. I didn't want that to happen. Everything was under control." "Control?" David suddenly appeared and interrupted, his voice like fire. "Are you telling me everything was under control? What was under control, incompetent? This is unacceptable." "David, stop. Don't talk like that. Wait a moment. Let's listen to her. She has the right to explain herself." Laura tried to intervene, but her husband was in a growing state of indignation. "No, Laura. Enough. This girl is always making excuses. Like that time she lost the house keys. She's not a nanny. She's a bad joke. She's not a good influence on our son." David stood up, gesturing with his hands. "And now, to top it all off, we have this waste of food, stealing things from the fridge, and even hair accessories. What else can we expect? I'm not going to sit around waiting for her to steal more from us." Tiana was paralyzed. David's words were like stabs. Stealing and ruining food? Stealing hair accessories? She had never done any of that. What else could they have said about her? Indignation swelled in her chest, but she knew that any attempt to defend herself would be in vain. He had already made his decision. "David, stop it. I haven't looked for the accessory properly yet. We can't say that. I only asked if you had seen it, and said I would ask Tiana. Don't be hasty. You're accusing her of theft," Laura said, her voice trembling. "That's a very serious accusation." "Ah, Laura, enough. How can we trust someone like that who's inside our house?" "I don't trust her," David retorted, glaring directly at Tiana. "You're leaving today. I don't want you here anymore. It's final." All those words fell like a bombshell. Tiana felt her stomach turn. She started, trying to hold back the tears. "I never stole anything. Nothing. I come from a simple but honest family. I've always taken good care of Ethan. He's like a younger brother to me. That doesn't matter anymore." "You're fired," David said, coldly, his voice cutting. "And I don't want any more excuses. I don't want to see your face here again. Now go." Sadness and an enormous weight overcame Tiana. She turned to Mrs. Laura and saw an expression mixed with shame and sadness. Tiana couldn't believe that the same woman who had been kind to her in the past was now. "There's nothing I can do, Tiana. I'm really sorry," Laura whispered, almost inaudibly. Devastated, Tiana turned and walked toward the door. She needed the money. She had bills to pay. How would she explain this to her family, where she was expected to bring in income? She didn't have much work experience. Every step felt like a burden. The memories of the last 4 years flooded her mind. Ethan's smile, the laughter they shared, the moments he called her his best friend. Now, it all seemed lost, mixed with flashes of all the hurtful comments she had overheard. As soon as she stepped out the door, a wave of heat hit her. The sun was still shining, but its light brought no comfort. With her head down, Tiana walked through the quiet neighborhood streets, tears streaming down her face. She felt so small, so insignificant. The injustice she was experiencing consumed her. How could someone be so cruel? When she reached her home, a small apartment she shared with her mother and younger brother, Tiana collapsed onto the sofa. The atmosphere, which had always been a refuge, now seemed like a reminder of the pain she was feeling. Her mother, noticing Tiana's expression, rushed toward her. "Tiana, what happened, my dear?" she asked, concern filling her voice. "I was fired," Tiana replied, her voice breaking. "Mr. David accused me of stealing things, verbally assaulted me, mistreated me, and didn't let me defend myself. He called me a thief. Mom, I'm not a thief. Not at all." "Oh, my God," her mother exclaimed, her hands covering her face. "You know that what he said isn't true. Don't let his words affect you or define you. He's a small man, Tiana. But what about Ethan? He was like a little brother to me. I can't believe they're keeping me away from him like this. I didn't even get to say goodbye to him," Tiana said, her voice filled with pain that echoed throughout the small room. "You need to distance yourself from that situation. It's not fair for you to suffer because of people who don't recognize your worth and who mistreat you. You are a smart, young woman full of dreams. Don't let their ignorance bring you down or rob you of your dreams," her mother said, holding her daughter's hand firmly. Tiana took a deep breath, trying to draw strength from her mother's words. "I know I'm not a thief, and I know I'm a good nanny, but this is going to leave a mark. I'm going to have to live with this forever. This stigma. I'm ashamed, Mom. I've never been treated like this." "No, you won't. These people won't define you, Tiana. This is just a phase. The world is big, and it's full of opportunities. Your heart is good. You are bigger than all of this. You will find your way, and someday they will see what you've become," her mother said, her eyes shining with hope. "Remember your grandmother Zilu and everything she went through to overcome the hardships she faced." Tiana's heart tightened. At that moment, she vividly recalled her maternal grandmother telling her about all her struggles. She had lived through immense suffering as a black woman in a harsh and ignorant time, especially toward black women. That memory woke something in her. One thing was certain. The harsh words, the pain she felt, would not define her. She would rise again, no matter what, and she would not allow people to treat her like that again. She would honor all the pain endured by her ancestors so that she, Tiana, could be here today. All the suffering each one had gone through to keep life going would not be in vain. In the days that followed, Tiana still felt pain in her soul, trying to recover from the humiliation. Life without little Ethan felt like an immense void. The memories mixed with pain haunted her, but there was a spark of determination in her heart. She wouldn't allow Mr. David's cruelty to define her. "I need a new beginning," Tiana said to herself one sunny morning as she looked out the window. The sky was blue, and she wanted her life to feel like that again. The determination inside her began to grow, like a plant sprouting in barren soil. Tiana decided she needed a plan. She couldn't afford to remain a victim forever. She recalled her classes in school and what she had always dreamed of, a better, more just world. She dreamed of being an advocate for truth and justice, and for people like her who suffered. The idea seemed distant, but now it was more than a dream. It was a necessity. She would study and grow. She would be better. "I will prove to them that I am more than their harsh words," Tiana murmured to herself, feeling the strength of her own voice. "And I will become the woman I always wanted to be." Tiana gazed out of the window of the small apartment she now called home. The city stretching before her was full of life and opportunity, a new chance after the dark years she had spent at the Smith's house. The bright lights of the streets reflected her dreams and hopes, and in that moment, she felt a surge of determination. It was time to move forward. After being fired so cruelly, Tiana knew she needed to start anew. The pain and humiliation were still fresh in her memory, but the anger had turned into fuel. The road to recovery wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to fight. It was on a sunny afternoon, while job hunting, that Tiana met Mr. Thompson, a respected black lawyer in the city. He was standing by the front of his house, watching his son play in the garden. Tiana, a little nervous, approached and asked if he needed help with the child. "Do you have experience with children?" Thompson asked, assessing her with a sharp look. Yes, I took care of my younger brother and a child for 4 years, Tiana replied, thinking of Ethan and how special he had been to her. I'm very dedicated, responsible, and I love playing and teaching. The lawyer smiled. Great. I need someone trustworthy to take care of my son. Come in. Let's talk. That conversation became the first step toward Tiana's new life. Mr. Thompson not only hired her as a nanny, but he also became her mentor. He saw the sparkle in her eyes and the passion for learning. His home was filled with books. In the weeks that followed, Tiana began to listen to stories about his work, how the dynamics of the judicial system worked, and, above all, the importance of justice. Her eyes shone. She felt her chest swell with hope at the thought that one day she could fight for a better world. Acquire knowledge like Mr. Thompson. She admired him. He was a black lawyer, respectful, wise, intelligent. You should consider studying law, Thompson said during one of their conversations. You have a sharp mind and an admirable sense of justice. The world needs more people like you. Tiana hesitated. Her eyes widened. It was her dream, but it seemed so far away. She was a poor black nanny from the suburbs, working to support her family. How could she study law? Her family was barely literate. She had come further than anyone. The idea of going to university seemed terrifying and, at the same time, exciting. I don't know, Mr. Thompson. I'm not sure I'm good enough. And I'm just a poor black nanny. I don't have the money for that. It's not for me, no. Listen, Tiana, he said, leaning forward. We all have our doubts, but that's what makes us human. What really matters is determination. It's the will to make things happen. And I see that determination in you. Those words resonated in Tiana's mind. Her eyes sparkled. She began to imagine herself in a courtroom, defending those who had no voice in society, defending herself, fighting for justice. I'll help you, Mr. Thompson said. Her eyes widened. You would help me? Really? Of course, the lawyer replied. The world needs more determined people like you. Then I want to, Mr. Thompson. What do I need to do? She said, a shy smile forming on her lips. I want to be a lawyer, like you. Months passed quickly, and with Mr. Thompson's support, Tiana enrolled in a law school on a scholarship since she didn't have the means, receiving financial assistance. She began working at Mr. Thompson's office, learning about this new world and complementing her education. Tiana dedicated herself completely to her studies, balancing her responsibilities as a nanny, her new academic obligations, and her work at Mr. Thompson's office. Despite the challenges, she excelled among the students. Her life experiences made her a perceptive and empathetic student, and she quickly became one of the top in her class through sheer effort. One night, as she was studying for an exam, Tiana received a text message from her friend Ava. Tiana, you won't believe it. There's a conference on social justice at the university tomorrow. You should come. She hesitated for a moment. She was exhausted and had to wake up early for work. But the idea of connecting with law professionals and hearing their stories excited her. Of course. I'll get ready and go, she replied. The next day, Tiana was nervous but excited. The university auditorium was packed, and she sat at the front, eager to hear the speakers. Among them were judges, lawyers, and public defenders who shared their experiences and challenges. One of them, a judge named Maria, spoke about the importance of empathy and understanding within the justice system. Remember, every case is more than just numbers and laws. The people who stand before us have stories, hopes, and fears, said Judge Maria, while the audience listened intently. Those words resonated deeply with Tiana. She had already experienced the pain of injustice and understood what it meant to be misunderstood, to feel fear. After the conference, she approached the judge and told her story. You have incredible strength, Tiana. Don't let bad experiences discourage or define you. Use that as fuel in your fight for justice, for a better world. Don't let your flame go out, Judge Maria encouraged her, holding Tiana's hands. Tiana left the conference with her heart full of hope and a renewed sense of purpose. She was more determined than ever to become someone who would fight to defend justice. The late-night study sessions became more intense, and the devoted nanny who cared for Mr. Thompson's son was now transforming into a passionate law student. In the following weeks, Tiana spent more time in the library, surrounded by stacks of books and notes. Mr. Thompson visited her frequently to check on her progress and offer advice. "How's the studying going, Tiana?" he asked. "It's going well, but I always feel like I could be doing more," she responded, with a sparkle in her eyes. "That's great, but don't forget to take care of your mental health. Balance is essential," he reminded her. "And remember, you're not alone on this journey. I'm here to help." Thompson's words always brought comfort to Tiana, and she was grateful to have him as a mentor. He had become a father figure to her, someone who believed in her potential and encouraged her to be the best version of herself. As time passed, Tiana made friends at the university. She joined a group of students who shared similar interests and were also passionate about social justice. Together, they organized events, conferences, and debates on relevant topics like discrimination and equal rights. At one of those gatherings, Tiana recalled her experience with the Smiths and decided to share her story. "Many times, we're judged by our appearance, by the color of our skin, or by our social standing. That's why it's so important that we fight for those who don't have a voice," she said, while her peers listened attentively. The faces around her showed understanding and support. Tiana felt warmth in her heart, knowing that her story could inspire others to rise up and fight against injustice. Classes, studies, and new friendships helped Tiana overcome the pain of her past. Every day, she felt stronger and more prepared to face whatever the future held. The dream of becoming someone who fought against injustices was no longer just a distant desire. It was a reality she was building with every step she took. Years passed in a blur for Tiana, and with each passing moment, she moved closer to her dream. After graduating with honors in law, Tiana decided to pursue a legal career. Every class, every book she read, brought her closer to the justice she had always longed for. Her classmates respected her, recognizing her talent and determination, and she became an advocate for equality and inclusion. One morning, as she prepared for another day at work, Tiana looked at herself in the mirror and saw a strong, determined woman. With her naturally curly hair tied in an elegant bun and a buttoned-up blouse that complemented her figure, she smiled at her reflection and left her home with her heart racing. In court, Tiana quickly stood out. She was recognized for her firm but fair stance and for her ability to handle complex situations. Her colleagues admired her, and lawyers sought her advice on difficult cases. Every day, she felt more competent and confident in her new profession, receiving praise for her work and growing ever stronger. During a meeting with colleagues, Tiana was invited to take on a challenging case. Her eyes lit up with the opportunity to make a difference. "I'm ready for the challenge," she responded, grateful for the chance to contribute in such an important field. One sunny afternoon, Tiana was approached by a colleague who congratulated her on her performance. "You're doing an excellent job, Tiana. We're all impressed with your dedication and skills," he said, shaking her hand. Tiana thanked him, feeling the weight of responsibility and the joy of being recognized for her effort. "Every day, I'm more committed to justice and to helping those who need it," she replied, with a smile on her face. She knew there was still much to learn, but she was determined to continue her journey with the same enthusiasm and passion. The road wasn't easy, but Tiana was more than prepared to face the challenges that lay ahead. The courthouse was buzzing with activity, with lawyers and clients moving back and forth. Tiana, now a respected figure in the legal world, walked through the halls, observing everything with a keen eye. She was preparing for another day of work when something caught her attention. In the distance, she saw a familiar face, one she hadn't seen in many years. David Smith, her former employer and tormentor, was in the halls, waiting for the start of a hearing. He looked uneasy, glancing around as if trying to recognize someone. Tiana paused for a moment, watching him from afar, and a wave of memories washed over her. David didn't recognize her immediately. He was too preoccupied with his own thoughts, but something about Tiana's presence left him unsettled. He looked at her several times, as if trying to remember where he knew her from. But Tiana, now a confident and composed woman, gave no indication that she recognized him. When the time came for the hearing, everyone headed into the courtroom. David sat on the defendant's bench, still trying to figure out who the woman he had seen in the hallway was. The tension in the air was palpable, and he couldn't shake the image of Tiana from his mind. The courtroom doors opened, and everyone stood. Tiana entered the room, now as the judge. David looked at her, and finally, it dawned on him. He recognized the young woman he had fired so cruelly years ago. The same woman he had humiliated was now standing before him, in a position of power and authority. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Judge Tiana, and I will be presiding over this hearing," she announced, her voice firm and confident. When David Smith's case was called, Tiana looked at the defendant who entered the courtroom. He was older now, with gray hair at his temples and an expression that mixed arrogance with fear. Tiana felt a chill in her stomach, but maintained her posture. What she didn't expect was David's immediate recognition. The contempt in his eyes turned to panic, and Tiana noticed his hands trembling slightly. "David Smith," Tiana announced, her firm voice resonating in the courtroom. "You are being charged with verbal assault, racial slurs, and driving under the influence of alcohol. How do you plead?" "That's not true, you incompetent," David responded, his voice trembling with both anger and fear. "You can't judge me. You're nothing but a nanny who doesn't know how to take care of children." The courtroom fell silent, and all eyes turned to Tiana. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Mr. Smith," she said, controlling the anger that simmered inside her. "I'm not just a nanny. I am a judge. And today, I am here to ensure that justice is served, regardless of what happened in the past." David seemed to have lost all confidence. He shook his head, trying to regain control, but the panic in his eyes was undeniable. "You can't do this. You don't know what you're saying." Tiana stood tall, ready to expose the truth she had kept inside for so long. "In fact, I know exactly what I'm saying, Mr. Smith. And I also know what happened years ago, when you fired me and verbally assaulted me unjustly." The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder, and Tiana realized everyone was eager to hear the story. "Do you remember the day I was fired?" she continued, her voice now louder, echoing through the room. "That day when the kids spilled yogurt in the living room, and you accused me of being a thief and blamed me for everything. You didn't care to find out the truth. You just accused me, humiliated me, and didn't hesitate to use words that hurt not only me but an entire legacy of discrimination." David tried to argue, but the wave of murmurs in the courtroom silenced him. "You can't bring that up in court. That was years ago." "Yes, it was years ago," Tiana replied firmly. "But your actions had consequences. You didn't just ruin my life, but you also forgot what it means to take responsibility. Today, you're here, facing the consequences of your actions, just as I did back then, and I'm the judge who will decide your fate." The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Tiana saw the jurors' faces, some surprised, others filled with understanding. She continued, her voice growing stronger and clearer. "I have worked hard to get to where I am. I overcame prejudice, pain, and humiliation. And today, I am not just a woman in a robe, but someone who seeks justice for all who have been oppressed." David, realizing that the situation was spiraling out of control, tried to change tactics. "This isn't fair. You're using your power to get revenge on me. This is an abuse of authority." "It's not about revenge," Tiana responded, feeling adrenaline surge through her veins. "It's about justice. You've been making the same mistakes. This isn't about past events. It's about recent ones. You've forgotten your role as a father, as a husband, and as a citizen. Your irresponsible actions can't be hidden by your words." David's lawyer tried to intervene, but Tiana raised her hand, signaling for silence. "I'm not here to listen to excuses. You had the chance to reflect on your actions, and now it's time to reap what you've sown." Tiana's eyes shone with determination. "Mr. Smith, you've been an example of how prejudice and arrogance can ruin lives. Today, you will finally answer for that. Not just for your infractions, but for everything you've represented in the lives of so many." The jurors seemed impressed, and the courtroom atmosphere was thick with anticipation. David, realizing that things were completely out of his control, slumped back in his chair, defeated. I didn't mean for this to happen," he murmured, his voice low, almost a whisper. "But it did," Tiana affirmed. "And now you must face the consequences. Your lack of respect for others can no longer be tolerated." It's time to learn that your actions have repercussions. After a brief deliberation, Tiana announced the final verdict. Mr. David, I am about to read the final verdict. The court finds that you must be convicted for your infractions, which have been thoroughly proven. There is no way to deny your guilt and intent to harm the victims. You will be fined $50,000 to be paid to the victims of your aggression, and you will undergo a rehabilitation program. Additionally, you must attend a course on prejudice and discrimination. It's time you learn that your words and actions can cause harm, and that true strength lies in acknowledging your mistakes and seeking change. You have the opportunity to learn to respect others. Your rights end where others begin. Everyone has the right to exist and be respected. Life in society must be organized and respected. The state exists for this purpose. I hope you learn the lesson and reflect on the path your life is taking. The silence that followed was heavy. The courtroom seemed to absorb the gravity of the situation. Tiana felt relieved, but also moved. The weight she had carried for so many years was finally lifting, and a new sense of freedom enveloped her. She had done it, not just for herself, but for all those who had suffered unjustly. David rose, defeated, and Tiana felt a mix of compassion and satisfaction. He had been her tormentor, but now, he was just a man who needed to learn. "Tiana," he said, his voice trembling, "I'm so sorry." She looked at him one last time, not with hatred, but with a sense of justice finally served. "Let your actions be a reminder, David. Learn from this," Tiana responded, her voice calm but firm. True justice isn't just about punishment, it's about transformation. As David left the courtroom, Tiana turned to the jurors and everyone present. She had found her voice and her purpose, not just as a judge, but as someone who wanted to make a difference. The battle she had fought in the past had finally come to an end, and this time, justice had prevailed. Tiana left the courthouse with a sense of fulfillment. She had faced her past and emerged victorious. Her journey of pain and humiliation had been transformed into a story of success and triumph. She had shown everyone, and most importantly herself, that she was more than their words. And now, as a judge, she was ready to continue her mission of seeking justice and equality for all.